What is up, ladies and gentlemen, man here. Welcome back to the channel. Quick episode about pre and post workout meals. Quick episode, probably gonna take a little longer. As you know, I tend to ramble with these kind of subjects. I tend to talk myself into a frenzy, so forgive me if I do that. Maybe you have to skip some stuff. I'll try to do some timestamps as well in the description or maybe in the frame here, who knows. I wanted to complement the recent episode on crag snacks a little bit, because it's actually a really interesting subject. When we think about ideal optimizing crag snacks, we could also optimize pre and post workout meals and get a lot out of that in terms of conditioning actually. And I wanted to preface the video with a little book recommendation, which is something that you rarely get on the Manny the Monkey network. So Celebrate Sport Nutrition by Asker Joikendrup and Michael Gleason. This is a good read. This is not sponsored or anything. Links down below in case you want to check it out. But I brought the book myself for the original price. It's simply a good read, okay? And if you're new to this all nutrition and athleticism subject, I would say, then it's a really good read. Talks a lot about energy metabolism, how energy is created inside of the cell, how fats, carbs are utilized for that, and how protein is utilized by all means for the regeneration of the body after a workout and everything along the like. Super science-based, so this is also for the crew who always cries, Manny, where is your science? What is your opinions based on? Where are the papers? Okay, this is some stuff for you. Pre-workouts. If we're thinking about ideal pre-workout meals, as we thought about ideal crag snacks, we have to think about the ideal state that we want to have the body in at the time of the workout, right? And probably we want to be carved up. We want to have a reasonable amount of glycogen stores. So this is number one criterion. Not number one, but this is one criterion. We want to be carved up, right? The ketogenic crew will now disagree. They will say, okay, I utilize ketones much more efficiently than carbs. Carbs get me out of ketosis. I want to utilize fats. It's much more healthy, yada, yada, yada. Might be the case that it's much more healthy and everything, but in terms of athletic performance, the vast majority of athletes disagrees with you, okay? The vast majority of athletes has made the experience that carbs are what gives them the most explosivity, the most quick movements, the quick available energy. Carbs are also the ones that can be burned anaerobically quite nicely in the cell. It's not very efficient, but it gives a really rapid energy, and I can very well imagine that that is what we need when it comes to climbing, and especially things like bouldering, okay, where it's super about max strength and only a few moves back to back and then it's over. So the more we get into endurance terrain, obviously the fat thing can become more and more relevant, but when it comes to max strength and quick explosive stuff, you're gonna go for the carbs, okay? So we wanna be reasonably carved up. Another detail that comes here as well, are you a competition climber? Sometimes competition climbers only have to perform for, let's say, 2-3 attempts, okay? Maybe it's the qualification for the event next day. You have to perform 3 times essentially. So for this, you don't have to be carved up in an amount that would enable you to climb 10 routes, right? Because this amount of carbs is also going to make your body significantly heavier. As we know, carbs pull water into the body due to water retention. They act a bit like salt. So not overdoing it if you're a competition climber might be sometimes a wise strategy if you only have to spend basically 3 goes or something. Because if you're carved up fully, usually you should be able to do 5 or 6 or even 7 max performance goes if you're reasonably trained and reasonably young, not super old and everything, okay? But yeah, these are the things that go into consideration there. Are you a comp climber? Then you don't need to be fully carved up. Are you a outdoor climber, as I am, for example, and you only have a limited number of outdoor days available anyway? Maybe you're a weekend warrior, you want to get the most out of these 2 days that you have for climbing during the week. Well, then you want to be probably as carved up as possible, because that's gonna allow you to spend the most attempts, and maybe you want to get a project done. Maybe if you get it done quickly, you want to check out something new. So essentially you want to make the most out of your climbing day as you can, and this means spending the most attempts possible, and this means being as carved up as possible. So this is what we have to take into consideration when it comes to the pre-workout meal. Another thing is that we probably want to be very low in blood fats, in circulating fats, or whatever you want to call them. I have talked about this previously, especially plant oils seem to affect performance to the negative. In my case, that is at least. I can't really say why this exactly is. Some commenter of the recent video pointed out that in endothelial cells of the blood vessels are not so able to produce nitric oxide in the presence of fats, and this way they are not able to dilate blood vessels as much as they would like to, essentially. And this is of course responsible for oxygen supply. So if you have less oxygen, obviously there is less energy available, and this way this might be the mechanism how fats actually impair athletic performance. Okay, that could well be. I don't have any proof for that though. I always thought maybe it clots the blood somehow and impairs oxygen supply that way, or it kind of it somehow sedates your nerves, the ion transport over the membranes or something like that, and this way you lose access to the full power of your body. Whatever it is, we want to be relatively low in circulating fats. And then there is another thing, we want to have at the same time as little water retention as possible. So this is the third criterion, because water retention is going to make you significantly heavier, and this is something we don't want if we want to have good climbing performance. So we probably are, when it comes to salt, a bit on the lower side. We are on carbs only as high carb as we need to be for the session, as I talked about before, because carbs pull a significant amount of water into the body as well. Okay, 3 criteria. We want to be carved up, we want to be low in circulatory fats, and we want to have little water retention so that we are as lightweight as possible. What kind of pre-workout meals do meet all these criteria? It also depends on which time the workout is taking place. Okay, I distinguish 3 times: in the morning, at noon, and in the evening. If the workout is taking place in the morning, the story is quite simple. We place the pre-workout meal on the day before in the evening between 5 or 6 or 7 p.m. This is about your own digestive abilities and everything, but we don't want to get the pre-workout too close to bedtime, because then we're gonna impair our sleep, and this is something that we don't want. Good climbing days usually had good sleep in front of them. So much about the time of the pre-workout meal. So what does it actually contain? A really good example for me personally is simply steak and potatoes. Really old-fashioned woodworker meal, okay? Steak and potatoes. Why? We have potatoes, it's a good source of carbs. Why is it a good source of carbs? Because it contains mainly starch, and starch is solely glucose. Something else that is solely glucose is glycogen in our muscles and in our liver. So starch is very glycogenogenic. The body has a relatively easy time to synthesize glycogen out of starch because there is no other compounds available there than glucose. If we eat something like fruit, for example, fruit is oftentimes 50% glucose, 50% fructose. And fructose is something that the body either has to burn readily, it has to burn it instantly, or it synthesizes it into fats, okay? Especially the liver likes to do that a lot, okay? Synthesizing fructose into fats, and this is something that we don't want, and we have elevated fats again, we store fats, we get a little bit heavier, not ideal, okay? We want to have solely glucose, and there starch comes into play. It's really glycogenogenic. You can also go for something like pasta or rice for that matter. It's also very high in starch, but I have the impression I need to drink so much after pasta and rice. Compared to potatoes, they are a bit more hydrated naturally already. The steak is also an interesting component of this meal, because usually modern steaks are very low fat, which is something that we strangely enough want for this matter, because we want to be low in circulatory fats during the workout, as I said before. This is probably not the healthiest thing, because I think that saturated fats and cholesterol and everything is actually something that should be in the animal products that you consume, because it's one of the most health-giving things about these terms about these things of nutrition. Okay, but as we speak, the modern fat phobia, so to say, prevents steaks from being properly fatty. And this way the steaks are very lean, which strangely enough comes to an advantage here, because we want to actually have low fats for this pre-workout. This is something that we save for the post-workout, okay? We're gonna talk about that in a second. Also, if you have really high quality meat supply, let's say you know a farmer around the corner where you know the animals roam free, they can move freely around on the meadows and everything, can run around, then you can expect that a good cut, the right cuts of these animals contain decent amounts of creatine actually. With steaks, obviously, this is the case. You can sense that almost. It has a slight salty umami-like taste. Okay, so if your meat exhibits these properties, then you can assume that there's creatine in there, and creatine is a very readily available energy source. You can take it up pretty easily and store it in your muscles pretty easily. You can also supplement it, as many of you guys know probably, but I wouldn't recommend it because it enables you to get a lot of creatine unnaturally into your body, much more than you would get if you eat naturally some source of meat or what. And I don't know how the body reacts health-wise then to this kind of stimulus, okay? I know that it pulls, then again, a lot of water into the body because it's supplemented in the form of a salt. And this is, again, something that we don't want when it comes to climbing performance, okay? So get your creatine in natural amounts from natural sources, and that is properly treated animals, free range, okay, right cuts of meat, and also fresh meat. The older meat gets, the more the creatine components of the meat get decomposed because they are very dense in energy, and obviously also other organisms like to utilize that and break it down or whatnot. I don't know the exact mechanism again, but I know that older meat contains less creatine than fresh meat, and that only makes sense. So there we have it, steak and potatoes, relatively low salt, okay? We want to be low salt so that we don't pull too much water into the body. Not zero salt. I used to preach zero salt, but I have made the experience that zero salt impacts performance a bit to the negative as well. Okay, it's a bit bad for your circulation. You don't have the blood pressure that you actually want to have if you're on zero salt. So get a bit of salt, but don't overdo it so that you have to drink tons. I wanted to add another little detail for the conditioning geeks out there. Okay, starchy evening meals will make you go pee during the night. This is an interesting effect. When we eat starch, we break it down in the body to simpler carbohydrates. Starch is a very long-chain carbohydrate, and the body needs to break it down. And every little chain break that has to be made, there one molecule of water has to be incorporated into these kind of carbs. So this is the reason why digestion of starch requires water very often if the source of food is very dehydrated, which is the case, for example, with rice or noodles, okay? Not as much with potatoes, as I've mentioned before, but with rice and noodles especially. So you drink a lot of water so that the body is able to break down all these chains into smaller substances. These substances then, these simple carbohydrates, are able to diffuse during the digestive walls into the bloodstream. There it's streaming, it's flowing through your body, and at various points in your body, these chain links, so to say, are placed together again to reform more complex forms of carbohydrates there again, namely glycogen. And the funny thing is that the water that you've put in when you digested the complex carbs and transformed them into simpler chain links, it gets freed again when the chain links are put together again in your body. So you need a bit of water to digest these carbs, and then you're gonna pee it out later during the night when the glycogen storage process is completed, so to say. So this is an interesting effect, and this also plays into the thing with the evening run that I've talked so much about previously. If you place your pre-workout meal into a reasonable time frame, 5-6 p.m., then you're gonna digest it, you're gonna store the glycogen everywhere in your body, and if you tend to have big legs, you're also gonna store reasonable amounts in your legs, but you are able to get rid of these and therefore get a lot lighter again, release a lot of oxidative water, release a lot of binding water from the carbs again by doing an evening run of 30 minutes, just a slight little jog, It also works only if you don't do this every day, okay? So if you do it only, let's say, once a month, then it works really well. According to my experience, you do an evening run, you burn off all the carbs again off your legs. They're gonna get significantly lighter. You're gonna take a pee afterwards, losing all the water weight. And then you essentially the next day have glycogen storages throughout your body where you want them, where you need them, in your liver and in your upper body. but none in your legs. And this way the legs are really light, and this is something that is beneficial for climbing performance, as I've talked about previously. So now that we've covered ideal pre-workout contents and timing for when the workout is happening in the morning of the next day, let's take a look at what happens when we postpone it to noon the next day. In my opinion, you might just as well skip breakfast and eat nothing special or eat nothing essentially until the workout starts at noon. Simply increase the contents of the pre-workout the day before a little bit so that you're able to endure this kind of fasting window until noon the next day. Maybe, you know, the crag is in the sun in the morning and you can't attack in the morning, okay? This is a strategy that you can go for in this case. Eat a little bit more the day before, then skip breakfast and attack full force. You're gonna be super empty. It's gonna feel amazing. Your body's gonna feel super light. You still have the glycogen stores from the pre-workout meal the day before stored throughout your body, not in your legs because you were so smart and made an evening run. And this way your performance on rock is gonna be still awesome. Now there's some people out there who are gonna say, man, I crash completely during the day if I don't have a reasonable breakfast. I need a reasonable breakfast. This is not the case in my personal case. I don't need a reasonable breakfast, a substantial one that is. But some people do. And for these people, I have the recommendation, try to mimic the pre-workout meal from the day before, just in a smaller amount at breakfast. So have steak and potatoes for breakfast. Why not? Okay, have steak and potatoes for breakfast. It's the same effects that we had with the pre-workout from the day before. You're gonna store some glycogen again. You're gonna store ideally some creatine again. You're gonna be low fat and you're gonna be relatively low salt. Okay. The reason being is that a lot of people, when it comes to breakfast, they go for something sweet, okay, something fruity, some cereals maybe, which contain a lot of processed sugar, also some more complex carbs, of course, but a lot of sugar as well. And what these kind of breakfasts tend to do is they're gonna spike your insulin, they're gonna spike your blood sugar, and afterwards what happens is they're gonna drop you significantly. They lead you into a deep, dark forest of low blood sugar, and this is not good when it comes to a climbing performance, okay? So you wanna have a decent amount of starch again in your breakfast so that the blood sugar spike is much more flattened out and is actually able to be converted into glycogen, right? Again, with sweet fruit and stuff, we have 50% fructose. This stuff can't really be stored in your body. It has to be readily burned, and it's not the time of your workout. The sweet stuff is more a during the workout meal. It's more a crag snack than something that is a pre-workout that prepares you for a workout, okay? So either skip breakfast or eat something that resembles the pre-workout from the day before as well. And actually the same thing is true if we postpone the workout even more to the evening, okay? You still, if you're hardcore, could go for the strategy that you eat nothing the whole day, right? I've made very good experiences with that. Insulin is super low, all the digestive processes are done. You can focus on the workout completely, even if you didn't eat anything throughout the day and had a proper pre-workout meal the day before. So now we are approaching something that is more like a 1 meal a day strategy, right? Where you only take calories in during the day during a time window of maybe 2 hours or something. I've experimented with that as well, works great as well, especially if you're adapted to it. But I can of course understand that not all people want to do that. Some people have work during the day, for example, and then have a small session, a workout in the evening. So for these kind of people, I would go for a proper breakfast then. Proper breakfast, proper steak and potatoes again, okay, ideal pre-workout meal, allowing the body yet again to store the glucose from the starch in form of glycogen during the day, and then ideally completing these digestive processes in the evening when your workout starts, getting the workout in, and then doing a small post-workout meal before bed because we don't want to impact sleep a lot. And now we're actually stepping onto the terrain of post-workout meals. Again, we don't want to eat it too late because if we eat too late, then we impact sleep too much. And sleep, in my experience, is actually more helpful when it comes to recovery than eating for that matter, okay? You can also just eat very little and have therefore relatively good sleep. You don't need to fast completely, okay, because fasting again is gonna increase your cortisol a little bit and it's gonna make you a little bit more nervous. And usually in a very fasted state you don't sleep as well as if you had just a decent amount of food. But you don't want to overeat like crazy so that your sleep is crap, okay? So this is gonna ruin your recovery more than eating less and having therefore a good sleep. So what should we eat in terms of a post-workout meal? Depends on whether this post-workout meal is not already yet again a pre-workout meal. If it's a pre-workout meal again, the steak and potato strategy works really well. If it's a post-workout meal, so that means that after this meal, you're essentially gonna have a rest day the next day. That's awesome because then you can eat almost whatever you want during this meal. So you can eat all the things that you weren't able to eat because all the other meals were pre-workout meals, and therefore you had to, you had to take back on certain things, like for example on the fats. So now it's time to get your essential fats in. Eat some fatty cuts of meat, some fatty fish, some fatty nuts, for example, as well. Okay, nuts and seeds works as well. It's not as high quality the fat as from the animal products in my present opinion, but anyway, this is something that you can go for during this time, okay, as a post-workout meal, because now it's not so crucial anymore that the next day is going to be super high performance. You did that already, you have a rest day next day, and at the end of the next rest day is going to be a pre-workout meal again. Then you reduce on the fats again, okay, you reduce on the salts again, and you focus on starchy carbs and a reasonable amount of meat to get your protein and maybe even your creatine if the meat is of a high quality, okay? So these are the thoughts that go into pre and post-workout meals. These are my present opinions. Let me know down below what's your experience with the subject. I had to cut it short a little bit in the end. I didn't want to get the video super long, okay? This subject is super deep, super in-depth. I made a lot of experiments with a lot of interesting results, but I can't cram this whole stuff into one video. So if you have any questions, then post them down below. If you have experiences with it, post them down below as well. Would be very interesting to read that. And I'll see you soon in the next one, guys. Keep crushing. It's a good day. Keep crushing. Bye.